Hello everyone, and welcome to my B&B For You channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. The air inside Forrester Creations was thick with tension, a suffocating mix of hurt, betrayal, and the faint scent of perfume and designer leather that clung to every corner of the executive office. The midday sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, catching the gold frames of family photos, perfect, polished images of a family that once looked unbreakable. But behind the beauty, cracks had been widening for months. Steffy Forrester stood near the window, arms crossed, heart hammering against her chest as she watched her father, the man she'd idolized since childhood, pace the room like a restless lion. Ridge Forrester, forever torn between loyalty and passion, family and desire, had once again made a decision that shattered the foundation of everything Steffy believed in. His voice was low but firm, rehearsed even, the kind of tone that tried to sound rational but only made her blood boil. "Steffy," he began, "you don't understand. Sometimes love isn't simple." "Sometimes, don't," she snapped, her voice slicing through his excuse before he could finish. "Don't you dare try to explain away this mess with one of your poetic justifications." Her eyes glistened, a mix of fury and tears threatening to spill, but she refused to let weakness show. "You walked away from everything, from Mom, from this family, for her again. How many times does she have to tear us apart before you see what she's done to us?" Ridge sighed, rubbing the back of his neck, visibly weary but still defiant. "It's not that simple, Steffy. I never meant to hurt anyone. I love both of your mothers in different ways, and sometimes different ways," she echoed bitterly, stepping closer. "You've been saying that since I was a teenager watching you break Mom's heart for the 1000th time. Do you even hear yourself anymore? Do you even realize what you've taught me, what kind of love I grew up believing was normal because of you?" Ridge's jaw clenched, and for a brief second, he looked like a man cornered by his own past, trapped in a cycle he couldn't escape. "I'm not perfect," he murmured. "I make mistakes, but everything I do out of love." Steffy let out a hollow laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "Love," she repeated, her voice dripping with venom. "That word has lost all meaning when it comes from you, Dad. You don't love. You choose. And every time, it's not us." She stepped even closer now, so close she could see the flicker of guilt in his eyes, the one emotion that had always betrayed him. Ridge opened his mouth to respond, but before he could form a single word, Steffy's hand shot out, sharp, fast, and fueled by years of silent resentment. The sound of the slap echoed through the office like a thunderclap, startling even her. Ridge staggered slightly, one hand lifting to his cheek, his eyes wide with disbelief. The silence that followed was unbearable, the kind that screamed louder than any argument ever could. Steffy's breath came in shallow bursts, but her gaze never wavered. Her hand trembled for only a moment before she steadied it by her side. "That," she said in a low, trembling voice, "was for Mom. For every tear she cried while you chased your latest fantasy." Ridge swallowed hard, his own emotions unraveling beneath the surface. "Steffy," he whispered, "I know you're angry, but don't," she interrupted again, her voice breaking now, the years of repressed pain bleeding through every syllable. "Don't try to make me feel guilty for finally saying what I should have said years ago." Ridge stepped toward her, his expression softening, fatherly concern seeping through his shock. "You're my daughter. You'll always be my little girl. No matter what happens between me and your mother, that never changes." She shook her head, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. "You don't get to say that anymore." Ridge froze, the weight of her words hanging in the air like a curse. "What are you saying?" he asked softly, his voice suddenly small, almost frightened. Steffy drew in a shaky breath, her eyes glimmering with unshed rage and love all twisted together in a painful knot. "I'm saying," she whispered, "that I can't keep loving a man who keeps breaking the people I love." Ridge's expression crumbled, his posture sinking as though she had just struck him again. But then, she took one more step closer, and with a trembling voice that tremored with every ounce of pain she'd been hiding, she spoke the 7 words that cut deeper than the slap ever could. "You're not the man I admired anymore." They hung in the air, heavy, final, and devastating, 7 words that shattered decades of father-daughter loyalty. Ridge blinked, his eyes wet, his mouth opening but no words coming out. He looked like a man who'd just been gutted, stripped of every illusion he'd ever held about being a good father. For a long, suffocating moment, neither spoke. The faint hum of the air conditioner was the only sound in the room. Steffi finally turned away, her breath shaky but her resolve firm. "You taught me strength," she said quietly, her voice steadier now. "But you never taught me respect, not the kind that lasts. I had to learn that on my own, by watching Mom pick herself up after every time you broke her. You want to know why I can't forgive you this time? Because you didn't just betray her again, you betrayed me. You made me believe that love means forgiving the unforgivable. But I'm done living like that." Ridge moved toward her again, his hand trembling slightly as he reached out. "Steffi, please," she stepped back. "No, Dad. You don't get to please your way out of this. Not this time." She wiped her tears roughly, reclaiming her composure, her spine straightening like a queen reclaiming her throne. "Do you have any idea what it's like watching you repeat the same mistakes? To see you hurt everyone around you just to chase a feeling you'll never be satisfied with? You say you love us, but love doesn't look like destruction. It doesn't leave ashes where family used to be." Ridge looked as though he might collapse under the weight of her words. He'd heard his children angry before, disappointed, even, but never like this. There was something final in her tone, something that told him this wasn't a tantrum or a moral lecture. This was Steffi closing a chapter, his chapter. "You sound just like your mother," he said weakly, almost to himself. Steffi turned back toward him, her eyes blazing. "No," she said. "I sound like the daughter you created. The one who finally learned not to repeat your mistakes." Ridge looked down, his hands trembling as he ran them through his hair, every breath coming out heavier than the last. "I never wanted this," he whispered. "I never wanted to hurt you." "But you did," she replied, her voice quiet but cold. "And the worst part is, you keep doing it. You don't learn, Dad. You just move on. You say sorry, you promise things will change, and then you go right back to tearing people apart." She paused, taking a deep, quivering breath. "I used to defend you. Every time someone said you were selfish or that you couldn't make up your mind, I'd say, you don't understand my father. He has a good heart. But now I realize, a good heart isn't enough if it keeps breaking everyone else's." Ridge's lips trembled, his voice barely audible. "Steffi, I love you." She closed her eyes, a tear slipping free. "I know," she said softly. "And that's what makes this so much harder." She turned to leave, her heels clicking against the marble floor, each step echoing like a heartbeat fading into silence. Ridge stood frozen, staring at the door long after it closed behind her, his reflection in the glass looking older, emptier, and more broken than ever. He brought his hand to his cheek, the faint sting of her slap still burning like a physical reminder of the emotional wound beneath it. 7 words. That's all it took to dismantle the image he'd clung to for years, the image of being the strong, loving father who could fix anything with a few well-chosen words. But this time, no apology would mend it. Steffi's words had drawn a line in the sand, one that even Ridge Forrester, with all his charm and passion, couldn't cross. Down the hall, Steffi walked with her head high, but the moment she reached the elevator and the doors closed, the weight of everything hit her. Her knees nearly gave out as silent sobs shook her body. She'd dreamed of standing up to him, of finally saying what she needed to say, but the reality of breaking her father's heart wasn't victory. It was grief. She pressed her palm against her chest, whispering to herself, he'll never change. And that truth, more than anything else, broke her all over again. But somewhere inside that heartbreak, there was also strength, the kind her mother had once shown, the kind Steffi now carried forward. In that moment, she knew she had become more than just Ridge Forrester's daughter. She had become her own woman, strong enough to walk away from pain, even when it wore her father's face. And as Ridge stood alone in his office, surrounded by photos of the family he'd fractured, the echoes of her 7 painful words lingered like ghosts in the air. "You're not the man I admired anymore." The echo of Steffy's words lingered long after she was gone, haunting the empty silence of the Forrester Creations executive suite. Ridge stood still for what felt like an eternity, his hand still hovering near his cheek, the faint sting of her slap a physical brand of his failures. The office felt colder now, despite the afternoon sun blazing through the windows. For years, Ridge had thrived in this room, his kingdom of silken sketches, where every decision had seemed monumental yet controllable. But now, everything felt hollow. The design boards lined against the wall, visions of beauty, luxury, perfection, mocked him with their stillness. They represented a world he'd built, a family empire he'd promised to protect, and yet here he was, the architect of its undoing. Slowly, he moved toward his desk, his reflection in the glass catching his eye. He barely recognized the man staring back, eyes bloodshot, shoulders slumped, the confident designer replaced by a man stripped bare of excuses. He sank into his chair, the leather creaking beneath him. "You're not the man I admired anymore," her voice replayed, not just as words, but as a verdict. For all his romantic battles, Brooke versus Taylor, passion versus duty, Ridge had always believed he could compartmentalize his sins, keep them separate from his children. But Steffy's slap had proved otherwise. His choices hadn't just scarred the women he loved, they'd poisoned his daughter's faith in him. And that was something he couldn't design his way out of. Meanwhile, in the Forrester parking lot, Steffy sat behind the wheel of her car, hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to steady her breath. The confrontation replayed in flashes, the look on Ridge's face when she slapped him, the crack of skin against skin, the disbelief in his eyes. Her entire body trembled, part rage, part heartbreak. She'd always prided herself on being strong, the daughter who could stand toe-to-toe with Ridge, who could handle anything life threw her way. But now she felt like a little girl again, the same little girl who'd once clung to her father's hand, believing he could fix anything. Except now she knew better. She closed her eyes, letting a single tear escape before quickly wiping it away. "Don't cry for him," she whispered to herself. "Not this time." But even as she said it, her heart twisted. Because for all her anger, she still loved him, and that made it hurt even more. At that same moment, across the city, Taylor Hayes sat in her quiet living room, nursing a cup of tea she'd let grow cold. She'd heard the rumors, of course, Ridge leaving again, this time for Brooke. It was a story she'd lived through more times than she cared to count. But something felt different this time. Maybe it was age, or maybe it was the exhaustion that came from years of watching the same heartbreak play out like a rerun. When her phone rang, she almost didn't answer, but when she saw Steffy's name flash on the screen, she felt a chill of concern. "Steffy," she answered softly. There was a pause, the kind that said everything before a single word was spoken. "Mom," Steffy's voice cracked, "I did something. I don't know if I should've." Taylor's heart tightened. "What happened?" A shaky exhale came through the line. "I slapped Dad." Silence. Taylor's fingers tightened around the mug, her mind racing. You slapped him?" Steffy's voice broke, raw and trembling. "I couldn't stop myself. He tried to justify everything, leaving you, choosing Brooke again, and I just lost it. I told him he's not the man I admired anymore." The words landed heavy between them. Taylor's eyes closed as she inhaled deeply, the ache of both mother and ex-lover flooding her chest. "Oh, sweetheart," she whispered. "You said what I never could." Back at Forrester, Ridge's phone buzzed on his desk, a text from Brooke, bright and casual, like nothing had happened. "Dinner tonight? I thought we could celebrate us." He stared at it for a long time before setting the phone face down. The word celebrate felt almost cruel now. What was there to celebrate? A love that had cost him the respect of his daughter? He rose and walked toward the family photos on the shelf. There was one from years ago, Steffy as a teenager, grinning beside him at a fashion event, eyes full of pride. He picked it up, running his thumb along the glass. "When did I lose you?" he murmured. His mind drifted to the past, the time he'd told her she could be anything she wanted, the way she'd light up when he'd let her sit beside him during design meetings, the time she'd said, "Dad, I want to be just like you." Those words used to fill him with pride. Now they filled him with regret. Because the truth was, she had become like him, stubborn, passionate, unyielding, but she'd also inherited the part he'd spent his life running from, the inability to forgive betrayal. Later that night, Ridge found himself driving aimlessly through Los Angeles, city lights blurring through the windshield. He wasn't heading home, or to Brooke's. He didn't even know where he was going. He just needed to escape, from the silence, from the weight of Steffy's words, from himself. Eventually, he ended up outside Taylor's house. He hadn't planned to come here, his heart had simply guided him. The lights were on inside, faint and warm. He hesitated at the door, debating whether to knock. Finally, he did. When Taylor opened the door, she looked surprised but not shocked. It was as if she'd expected him. "Ridge," she said quietly. "Steffy told me." He nodded slowly, his throat tightening. Of course she did. She stepped aside to let him in. The familiarity of her home, the framed photos, the scent of lavender, the gentle hum of stillness, was both comforting and painful. "You should sit," Taylor said, her tone measured but gentle. Ridge sank into the couch, running a hand through his hair. "She hates me," he said simply. "No," Taylor replied. "She's hurt. There's a difference." Ridge looked up at her, eyes heavy. She said I'm not the man she admired anymore. Taylor exhaled softly. "Maybe you aren't. But maybe you still can be." The words struck him harder than he expected. "How do I fix it, Doc?" he asked, his voice cracking. "You can't fix it with a grand gesture, Ridge. You've been doing that your whole life, running back and forth, thinking an apology or a promise can erase the pain. But Steffy doesn't want words. She wants proof." Ridge nodded slowly, looking down. I thought she'd always see the best in me." Taylor sat across from him, her eyes soft but firm. "She did. That's why it hurts her so much to see the worst." Across town, Steffy sat on her couch, a glass of wine untouched in front of her. Her children were asleep upstairs, their soft breathing the only thing grounding her. She'd told Finn what happened, though not in detail. He'd held her, quiet and steady, the way he always did. "You did what you had to," he'd said simply. But now that she was alone, doubt began to creep in. Did she go too far? Was slapping him just another wound in the cycle of pain? She thought about the way his eyes had looked, not angry, not defensive, just broken. For a moment, she'd seen the father she grew up idolizing, not the flawed man he'd become. And that made her heart ache. She picked up her phone, scrolling through her photos until she found one, her and Ridge at a fashion event years ago, both beaming. She stared at it for a long time before finally setting the phone face down, whispering, "Why couldn't you just stay the man I believed in?" The next morning, Ridge woke up on Taylor's couch, his head pounding but his mind clearer than it had been in days. Taylor had fallen asleep in the armchair across from him, a blanket draped over her shoulders. For a moment, he just watched her, reminded of the steadiness she'd always offered him, the quiet kind of love that didn't demand anything in return. He stood and moved quietly toward the window, watching the sunrise spill over the horizon. "I have to make this right," he murmured. Taylor stirred awake, her voice groggy but calm. "Then start by listening to her. Really listening. Don't defend yourself. Don't explain. Just hear her." Ridge nodded. He knew she was right. For once in his life, he needed to stop talking and start understanding. Later that day, he showed up at Steffy's house, unsure if she'd even open the door. When she did, her expression was guarded. Dad, she said, her tone cool. What are you doing here? He swallowed hard. I needed to see you. Just to listen. She hesitated, then sighed and stepped aside. 5 minutes, she said. Ridge nodded, stepping inside. The living room was filled with toys and family photos, reminders that she'd built a life full of love and stability, everything he'd once failed to give. He sat down while she remained standing, arms crossed. I know I hurt you, Ridge began, his voice quiet. And I don't expect you to forgive me. I just want you to know. I heard what you said. Steffy tilted her head slightly, skeptical. And you were right, he said simply. I'm not the man you admired. I've been selfish. I've hurt people who didn't deserve it, your mother, Brooke, you. I thought love was enough to justify everything, but it isn't. Love without respect is just chaos. I see that now.